Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesa Sunyavari Praschachara Sutarine. Hare Krishna. Oh, greetings to the assembled devotees. I was told that today's theme for today's class is Narottam Thakur, one of our great Vaishnava acharyas. Now, I don't know that much about Narottam Thakur, except to remember that the one great concept in Vaishnava philosophy that Srila Prabhupada always ascribed to Narottam Thakur, and that was that a Vaishnava is only gauged according to his or her degree of surrender and realization in Krishna consciousness. Race, creed, color, nationality, gender, social status, householder, brahmachari, Brahman, Sudra, none of this matters anymore. Advancement in Krishna consciousness is measured only by how much one is absorbed in devotional service to Krishna. So certainly this philosophy of Narottam Thakur's allowed Srila Prabhupada to carry his message of Krishna consciousness to the West, to us, the lowest of mankind, meat-eaters, mlechas, totally absorbed in sense gratification, men and women alike. In Srila Prabhupada's eyes, in Srila Prabhupada's eyes, we were open and equal candidates for his wonderful message of Krishna consciousness. You can say that Narottam Thakur broke down the gates of prejudice so that Srila Prabhupada could come to us in the West. 50 years ago, as young Westerners, Bhaktivedanta Swami appeared and seemed to be to us the perfect person. He was the perfect teacher who could answer any question you asked him to your full satisfaction. He was our best friend. He seemed to love us more than anyone else we had ever met in our lives. And he never made mistakes. He was on a mission to change the world. And most of all, he filled our lives with laughter. Srila Prabhupada was always jolly. Being with Srila Prabhupada was the most fun we'd ever had in our lives, performing what he called devotional service. In 1967, Srila Prabhupada revealed to us Krishna's own words in Bhagavad Gita. These are Lord Krishna's instructions to Arjuna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. In that book, we could see it's the summary and compendium of all knowledge. At the onset, Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna asked Krishna, "What should I do? How should I act?" And Krishna replies, "Just act for me. Strive for me with your fullest energy. Take the biggest risk for me on this battlefield. Win or lose, it doesn't matter. I will protect you." So in other words, as Prabhupada said it, chase the rhinoceros. Swamiji explained to us that Krishna most appreciates devotees who risk the most on his behalf. And if you risk everything for Krishna, he must personally intervene to remove the obstacles to your risky service. Krishna has made this his promise to us. As Srila Prabhupada said, Krishna will protect you. Dare to pursue the biggest goals for Krishna. And this was the spirit and the subject and the object of all of our activities. Chasing the rhino became the hue and cry of that generation of the Swami's starstruck disciples. He said two things basically. You become Krishna conscious yourself, and you spread Krishna consciousness. Those two things. That's it. Moreover, you become Krishna conscious by spreading Krishna consciousness. You get two for the price of one. This is the secret of transcendental knowledge. Act for Krishna, and you get Krishna. In those early days, we had no models. There was no history of Krishna consciousness. There were no maps, no books. We had no books for years. No books of instructions, no well-marked paths. We had only the Swami, his words, and his personal example. How he had chased the rhino to America as an old man with no money and no plan, no friends, under Krishna's protection. Each day he said to us one thing: what I am telling you will save humankind. You must help me change the world. So most of you know the stories, how it happened, how the Swami captured a few of us in those days. But in such short time, the Hare Krishna culture exploded around the world. Especially if you've read Volume 1 of Chasing Rhinos. This was my first book. How many people have read this book? A few, okay. Well, Volume 1 kind of tells the stories from the earliest days with Srila Prabhupada in San Francisco and in London. But this Volume 2, which we are launching today, this is the India story. I was an eyewitness. I'm an eyewitness to the rebirth of the Krishna consciousness movement in this ancient land of Krishna's birth. These are the stories of a great hero, Srila Prabhupada, and of my growing love for him. Volume 2 begins in October 1970, and it describes the nearly 2-year period with Srila Prabhupada and his Western devotees in India, and the amazing adventures during that period. The themes, or the purpose, I guess you could say the message from Volume 2 might be broken down, let's say, into 3 parts. First, Srila Prabhupada as the commander-in-chief, the general to his tiny army. Before coming to India, we did most of the work in America and Europe. We did all of the work running around. Prabhupada advised, but we did all of the work. We set up the temples, we did this, we did that. But in India, we didn't know how to do anything. Srila Prabhupada was the total commander-in-chief of the pastimes in India. The second point in this book is to illustrate Srila Prabhupada's perfect timing, historical timing. 1970. It's the rebirth of India as a nation. Your national identity is young and new, and it's also the rebirth of Krishna consciousness in India. Historical timing, perfect. Point 3 might be, and I think this is the most important message from this book. In 1970, Krishna was practically gone from India. Krishna consciousness was nearly extinct in this country. Now, as you can see, in less than 50 years, Krishna is everywhere. Krishna is the most famous name of God in India today. So you will read this book and be amazed at how Srila Prabhupada did it. In a single 15-month period, Srila Prabhupada personally, single-handedly, dug deep into the soil of Mother India and planted the mighty tree of Krishna consciousness that you see around you today. A few months shy of 50 years ago, October 1970, Srila Prabhupada arrived in Bombay with 20 of us, his Western disciples. The reason and the purpose of Srila Prabhupada's mission in India is stated very clearly in one of the purports to a verse in the 4th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, and I'll just read that. This is the underlying principle of Prabhupada's mission in India. For the past 2,000 years, India has been subjugated by the rule of foreigners, and the legs of progress have been broken. In the Western countries, the eyes of the people have become blind due to the dazzling glitter of material opulence. The blind man of the Western countries and the lame man of India should combine together in this Krishna consciousness movement. Then the lame man of India can walk with the help of the Westerner, and the blind Westerner can see with the help of the lame man. In short, the material advancement of the Western countries and the spiritual assets of India should combine for the elevation of all human society. So this partnership, the lame man of India and the blind man of America, to create this partnership was and is Srila Prabhupada's mission for India. It's important for you to imagine now the scene and what it was like in India in 1970. Most of you probably weren't even born yet. But after 200 years or so of colonial rule, the British had just left India 23 years before we came. And after so many millenniums of foreign domination, you, India, are a new country. Your government and your economy are struggling to figure out how to manage yourselves, how to survive, how to stabilize in this new global age. 1970 was an experimental time, government and economy. There was communism on one side, capitalism, nationalism, socialism. The Indian government and economy were trying to find a system, looking inward. There wasn't much global reach yet. In fact, Srila Prabhupada was the first Indian person I had ever seen, what to speak of meat. So think about this historical window, 1970. Krishna consciousness comes in at the same time that you are being born as a national entity. The perfect historical window chosen by Srila Prabhupada. Into this land struggling with new birth comes one old man, 74 years old. And these 20 inexperienced foreign youngsters, we came here on one-way tickets. We had no money in our pockets. In fact, we didn't know what to expect in India. Our fantasy or our vision of India was something like this. That's that place where those guys sit around with cloth wrapped around their heads, and they play the flute, and they have a basket in front, and the snake comes out. This was our idea of what India must be like, a land of magic and yogis and all that. Mysterious place. Suddenly we're dropped into this land. Srila Prabhupada called us here by letters. There was no email or cell phones in those days. And he sent 20 letters out to different devotees spread around the Western world, like Los Angeles, New York. I was in London, another guy was in Germany. And we got these letters, and they just said, meet me in Bombay in first week October. That was it. There was no plan. We didn't even know each other. We were strangers to each other, these 20 devotees. So we arrived here, and there was some kind of, we were kind of used to Krishna's magic around us, so it didn't really surprise us that one by one we came, and here was Prabhupada, and we were all here. Now what do we do, Srila Prabhupada? What's the plan? Well, there's no plan. There's no plan. Krishna had his Prabhupada. Around Prabhupada, he would catch you up in the magic of his pastimes, and whatever happened was the plan. Krishna was in total control of everything. But we had our common father, our commander-in-chief at this point, Srila Prabhupada, who had to do everything. We didn't know how to do anything in India. He taught us how to eat here, how to sleep here, what kind of manners we should have, how to act, how to travel. He even cured our little illnesses. He managed the income and the expenses. All money was in Prabhupada's hands. He slowly told us how to operate in India, how to open bank accounts, how to do this, how to do that. And we watched Krishna's plan unfold in India, and Krishna's magic plan. And Prabhupada flowed with it, and we flowed along in his wake. He organized us like a little army under the system of Vedic knowledge, and his word was our command. What Prabhupada said to do, we did, applying our American ways of doing things here in India. At our first big public meeting in early October 1970, was a huge all-India meeting of Hindu leaders in Bombay. It was called the Bharatya Sadhu Samaj. And Prabhupada famously said, so practically millions of people in Western countries are chanting Hare Krishna and taking up this, your Indian spiritual system. Now you have forgotten. You want to be like them, after money and motor cars. Now they want Krishna, that is all. They want your spiritual treasure house, which you have neglected. This is your wealth, Bhagavad Gita, why you do not give. So this was sensational news for the people of India. The West wants our spiritual culture. That night, Srila Prabhupada brought us to his room, and he told us a story. He told us that by tradition, if a Maharaja marries an English wife, they call her his white elephant. He looked at us and said, now you are my dancing white elephants. And Srila Prabhupada's fame with his dancing white elephants quickly spread out across the nation. After 1 week, we used to go out on Sankirtan every day up and down the streets of Bombay. But after 1 week, Prabhupada called us back to his room, and told us that, no, we should stop this Sankirtan, because here in India they will think we are simply beggars. He said, and then he introduced what he called the Life Member Program. That was a great idea. Get the leaders to join and others will follow. The price in those days for life membership was 1,111 rupees. I don't know how much that's worth now, but it's probably about 1 lakh. It was a lot of money. So we had to go for the wealthy elite class first. And we did what Americans do best, business and sales. We hit the street. We hit the offices of every big man in Bombay. We usually went in pairs, like the good guy and the bad guy. My partner for selling life memberships was named Rishi Kumar, but he was the Rishi Kumar from Brooklyn, New York. Tough guy, New York guy. When we'd barge into some CEO's office. He would be very surprised. And my friend would start banging on the desk and say, "You must become life member." And I would go, "Oh, please forgive him, sir. He is just trying to follow the orders of his spiritual master." I was the good guy. He was the bad guy. 90% of the time they would write a check. And we promised them everything. We promised them all of Prabhupada's books forever. We promised them wherever they went around the world, they could stay in our magnificent temples free of charge. Truth of the matter was, we had no books. Outside of a few personal copies, we had no books yet. And as far as staying in temples, maybe there were 2 temples in the world that had more than enough floor space just to lie down. But this was Srila Prabhupada's method. Always looked far ahead. And he taught us to act like this. Have no fear. Go for it. Risk everything. Nothing is impossible. Chase the rhinoceros. And when we first arrived in India, we expected to see Krishna everywhere. But where is he? We couldn't find Krishna. There were no Krishna temples, no Krishna images. There was no Krishna in Bombay. And Bombay is the biggest city in India. Where is Krishna? We were so surprised. We saw Hanuman here and there, and in the taxis we'd sometimes see a little Ganesh on the dashboard. Shiva seemed to be around. And we saw this, and who was this lady with the 8 arms and all the skulls around her neck? She was everywhere. Now, this is very important for you guys to know. You must understand the past to compare it with your own present situation, now surrounded here by Krishna everywhere, to appreciate what Srila Prabhupada accomplished in India. 50 years ago, there was practically no Krishna left. Now, Krishna is everywhere. The Krishna Palace Hotel, Krishna Sweet Shop, Krishna Bicycle Shop, Krishna this, Krishna that, everything is Krishna now. All the stories are here in volume 2, how he did this. From Bombay, we traveled out to Amritsar, Indore, Surat, and then to a 1-month camp at Kumbh Mela in Allahabad, where Bhaktivedanta Swami and his dancing white elephants were the main attraction, a month-long attraction for millions of Hindus who came there. And one thing we young Americans knew how to do was put on a show. We had seen some of these big pandal programs here and there, so we decided to have one ourselves. Only this was going to be the biggest pandal ever. We got a huge tent pandal erected in Cross Maidan, right in the center of Bombay. We advertised it heavily. In those days, India had not yet seen big-scale American advertising. We had hundreds of billboards bigger than this room, everywhere, all over town. Save your life, come to Krishna consciousness, like that. Huge displays of advertising. We got a balloon made, 16-foot diameter balloon, filled it with helium, and sent it up 200 feet in the air over Bombay. And from this balloon hung the lights, flashing on and off, that said, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. You could see the balloon from one end of Bombay to the other. So the people of Bombay came to see Srila Prabhupada there for 10 days and 10 nights, over 1 million people. Bombay fell in love with Srila Prabhupada and his jolly band of Western followers. But except for one boy, young Gopal Krishna Das, who had joined Srila Prabhupada in Canada, there were yet no Indian devotees joining us. After 6 months of being in India, there was not one Indian devotee yet. I think it was a case of culture shock on both sides. We were shocked by the culture of India from our side, but Indians must have been shocked by our culture presentation also. They were confused. What is this? But after gradually, the Indian youth especially began to see that we were the real thing. And at Cross Maidan, a young Indian student named Raghunath Patil joined, and he became our beloved Lokanath Goswami. Then, in June 1971, the best thing that ever happened to me, Srila Prabhupada appointed me as his personal secretary. Wow. And thus began the wildest and most exciting adventure of my life. The first place we went to as Prabhupada's secretary was Moscow, Russia. Now, hardly there's anyone in this room who remembers what the world was like in 1970, 71. But it was firmly divided into two camps, capitalism and communism. And down the middle was an iron curtain that you couldn't penetrate one side or the other. Each day, the world lived in the expectation that one side would drop the atomic bomb on the other side. It was always in a state of high alert, high danger. And Srila Prabhupada had been saying for years, I want to go to Russia. Nobody can go to Russia. He said, those people are more firmly trapped in Maya than anyone else on the planet. I must go there and help them. Finally, somehow or other, I got us a 5-day visa to go to Russia. It was a package deal, included hotel, food, and sightseeing trips to see the miracles of the Soviet Union. So we went. We had no plan. We didn't know anybody there. The first day we arrived, up in the hotel room, there was noise in the street, so Prabhupada looked out the window. And there was a military parade going by in the street below. Thousands of goose-stepping soldiers, and guns and artillery and tanks and these huge rockets as wide as this room. For 2 hours this parade passed by Prabhupada's window, military parade. And after the parade passed, Prabhupada turned around and looked at me, had a tear in his eye, and he said, "You cannot rule a nation by fear. Within 20 years, all of this will be gone." The next day, I was walking in the street, and a young Russian boy stopped me to try to change money, rubles, dollars and rubles. I brought him up to see Srila Prabhupada. And in 3 days, I got to witness Prabhupada's most extreme example of mystic power. In 3 days, Prabhupada transformed this young student into a pure devotee of Krishna. Everything, the philosophy, the traditions, the culture, the chanting, even how to cook, the Varnashram Dharma, every aspect of Krishna consciousness, this young boy absorbed and learned. Anyway. This boy, Ananta Shanti Das, then he went on to create thousands of devotees, underground devotees in the police state called Russia and the Iron Curtain countries, all over, thousands. And yes, the Soviet Empire collapsed almost exactly 20 years later, just as Prabhupada said it would. From Moscow, then we went to Paris, San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York, then to London again. In London, in 1971, September, does anyone know what the Mensa Society is? Mensa? Mensa Society is a society where you have to have something like 200 IQ to join. It's a society of elite intellectuals. So we were sitting in the Berry Place Temple in London, and the president and secretary of the Mensa Society came to visit Srila Prabhupada. And for 2 hours, they debated. They debated the meaning of life, the meaning of cosmos. Everything was debated. And Prabhupada defeated every one of their arguments. I recorded this. By the end of the conversation, these Mensa guys were saying, "Oh, would you please join us? We need you. You're the most intelligent person we've ever met." So that night, Prabhupada called me to his room and he said, "Now you have studied philosophy in college, right?" I said, "Yes, I did. I studied philosophy in college." He says, "Okay, every morning from now on at 8 a.m. you will come to my room and you will be the Western philosopher and I will defeat you." And we started with I think Plato or Aristotle maybe, for early Greek philosophers. And each day for the next 9 months, I appeared in Prabhupada's room as the Western philosopher, and Prabhupada defeated me every day. All of these conversations were recorded, and I've selected the kind of the best of them, the cream of those amazing debates in this book also, for those who like philosophy. And then we went to Africa, September 71. You'll love some of these African stories that illustrate how Srila Prabhupada conquered this wild continent and brought them to Krishna consciousness. And then October 71, we came back to India. And in the next 6 months period, you'll understand Srila Prabhupada's most powerful mystic display in India. From October 71 to end of March 1972. First thing was the Calcutta Pandal program in Deshapriya Park. 30,000 people came to see Prabhupada every day for 10 days. And then in November 71, the New Delhi Pandal. This Pandal was at the LIC grounds in Connaught Circus here. It was like hitting the bullseye of India. 50,000 people a day came to see Prabhupada there for another 10 days. This is Srila Prabhupada as the ultimate politician. Now, whatever activity of life you can imagine, a lawyer, a doctor, a priest, any occupation you can imagine, an accountant, whatever, Srila Prabhupada was expert in every field of activity. He was the expert lawyer. He could out-lawyer any lawyer on the planet. He was the ultimate accountant. He knew how much he had in every bank account to the penny. He was the ultimate expert in everything he did. And here in Delhi, he was the expert politician, the ultimate politician. In November 71, India was on the verge of war with Pakistan. It was a very powerful time. There were blackouts every night, police roaming the streets everywhere. They were about to go to war with your neighboring country. It was inevitable. So during this time was the Pandal program. And every night, the political leaders of India came to greet Srila Prabhupada, ask for his advice behind the stage. What should we do? And introduce him to the audience every night. The mayor of Delhi, the minister of defense came, the minister of finance, ambassadors, scientists, educators. They all came to introduce Prabhupada and then confer with him behind the stage. What should we do about this war? And Srila Prabhupada dazzled the political leaders of India, and through them he made a deep impact on the spiritual priorities and policies of this nation. I'll just read one small passage. Prabhupada's triumph at the Pandal event in New Delhi was like completing a full circle. In the 1960s, the SWAMI had struggled in Delhi, alone and penniless, to print the few volumes of the Srimad Bhagavatam that he hoped, beyond reason, to someday bear with him to America. And now, just a few years later, he had returned to India's capital as a charya of a worldwide spiritual organization that distributed thousands of his books every day. So just in 5 years' time, from nothing in this Delhi, Prabhupada used to tell me stories that he would take the paper for printing his books, he would take across Delhi by cart because he didn't have the money, the 50 annas or whatever it was, for bus fare. He would push a cart with paper on it across Delhi. And now, just 5 years later, from this nothing, Srila Prabhupada has returned to New Delhi as the most famous Indian spiritual master in the world. After 2 weeks in Delhi, then Srila Prabhupada took us down to see Vrindavan. November 26, 1971, his first trip to Vrindavan with his Western disciples. We were so surprised. This small, dusty village, a few old Vaishnavas loitering here and there. Oh, look, there's a guy with a bead bag. There wasn't much there. But Srila Prabhupada took us around to all the places of Krishna's pastimes, and our eyes were gradually opened to the magic of Krishna in Vrindavan. You'll read the stories in here, how Srila Prabhupada planted the seeds in Vrindavan, which became the mighty Krishna Balaram temple. Just see, I remember 2 years back, last time I was here in Delhi, we got a car and decided to drive down to Vrindavan on the new freeway. As we got off the freeway and started to drive into Vrindavan, there was a huge traffic jam. Hundreds of cars stopped ahead of us. We stopped there and we waited for almost 2 hours. We'd go forward 5 inches, 10 inches, 15. Finally, the police came to us and said, "You cannot enter Vrindavan today. It is too crowded." Just see, all because of Srila Prabhupada. Then in December 71, Srila Prabhupada takes a jet plane to Bombay again and negotiates for nearly 5 acres of prime land in Juhu. And then on to Jaipur, guests of the Maharani of Jaipur and the Govind Dev Ji temple for 10 days. There's some great stories in here about the Jaipur yatra. Then on to Madras, Visakhapatnam, Calcutta, and then on to Mayapur. Mayapur was a very difficult place to establish anything. For several years, devotees had been trying just to get a little tiny piece of land there because Prabhupada wanted so badly to build something in Mayapur. Finally, they had about 2 or 3 acres, small parcel. They had built a little fence along the road and one little hut, straw and mud hut, bamboo. But Prabhupada saw that as the beginning, and he said, "Let us go there and lay the cornerstone for our giant Mayapur temple." Okay, so off we went from Calcutta to Mayapur. Prabhupada showed us how to dig a hole, and he had an Antashesha brat and a little marble plaque. And we put up a pandal program, and hundreds of people came. Prabhupada, and especially Prabhupada's godbrothers came from the local area. They were very concerned. They were very, I think, almost skeptical about this group of young gorillas that hung out with Prabhupada. But anyway, on February 29th, Srila Prabhupada laid the cornerstone at Mayapur. February 29th, 1972. Now note this date, February 29th, because in a couple of days later, Prabhupada got a phone call from Kiradakshai in Vrindavan saying, "Prabhupada, come to Vrindavan immediately. You have got the Raman Reti land." So he rushed to Vrindavan on March 10th. And again, Prabhupada's amazing high-pitched energy. I wrote this episode as a screenplay. You'll have to read that, because it was more like a movie than an actual event. It seemed so magic and otherworldly that within 3 days, Srila Prabhupada laid the cornerstone for the Krishna Balaram temple in Mayapur, in Vrindavan. So February 29th, March 13th, what is that? 2 weeks. He's done 2 major cornerstones on 2 major properties. Then on March 17, we rushed to Juhu, and where he laid the cornerstone for the Juhu temple on March 23rd. February 29th to March 23rd, scarcely more than 3 weeks' time, Srila Prabhupada has laid the cornerstones for his 3 major temples in India. Now that's a pretty powerful display. And I didn't really realize this until 50 years later, I started researching. Because when you're in the middle of that hurricane, you don't really know what's going on. But from far away now, I can see, how could anyone do this? I'll read one little passage that kind of sums that up. In less than 1 month, Srila Prabhupada has done the impossible. He's laid the cornerstones for his main 3 temples in India despite all odds. Naxalite bandits, floods, cold, heat, lack of money, envious opponents, unsupportive godbrothers, caste Goswamis, a communist-leaning central government under martial law with strict rationing of construction materials, our shaky legal standing, and a handful of young but worn-out devotees. The lands we have acquired are so old, with so many contending proprietors, and so large and in such vital locations. To even think of owning these properties is almost surreal. We are recent arrivals on Indian soil, with very little organization or social standing. And yet, despite these obstacles, Prabhupada's unrelenting desire to please Krishna has somehow prevailed. He did it. Seeing all this from the inside, typing his letters, making phone calls, huddled with him in late-night strategy sessions, I am in awe. This is Superman beyond anything yet, and he is just getting started. So in April, for Australia, New Zealand, Hong Kong, Japan, Hawaii, and Los Angeles. There's many more amazing stories about those places in here too. I won't take too much more time. This is volume 2, and this is especially the India story. And there's more to follow in volume 3 about India. But I've written this volume 2 of Chasing Rhinos with the Swami, especially for you, the devotees of India, so you can better understand the unimaginable foresight, the boundless energy, and the inconceivable determination of Srila Prabhupada. And so you can see deeper into Srila Prabhupada's profound personality and understand more about his form and his laughter and his love for every living entity and his perfect actions. Krishna consciousness was nearly extinct in India in 1970, and you'll read here how in such a short time he laid the groundwork and structure for the vast power and influence of ISKCON and Krishna consciousness in India today. This is a thriller book. I've written it like an adventure novel. So hold on to your seats when you read it. If there's one passage from these books which kind of sums up everything, I think it might be this. When Prabhupada wanted me to, in his room, he would ring a little bell. Ding, 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 ding. His little bell tinkling even in sleep has become my wake-up call to happiness, transcending all other previous meanings of happiness. I cannot see enough of Prabhupada. The physical beauty of his face, especially his face, captures my eyes from morning till night, and I feast on his endless allure. He trusts me. He depends on me. How can I possibly deserve such mercy? He is in my care, I thought, forcing me to rise beyond all other considerations. I'm his audience. He seems to be energized by my laugh. He tries things out. He floats ideas. I'm a sounding board, his straight man. What do you think, Shyamsunder? He catches my glance from across the stage, raises an eyebrow like, how am I doing? And his smile and his laugh, especially his laugh, are all that I live for. So I'm kind of old now myself, but I'm more optimistic now than ever. Srila Prabhupada always said he did not want millions of stars. He wants just one moon. And seeing all of you boys and girls out there today, I see many, many moons rising to illuminate the world. You are the realization of Srila Prabhupada's biggest dream. What he used to tell us every day, you must help me change the world. So this book is for you, dear friends. Now please use it in your never-ending attempts to change the world. You have to change the world. There's 500 pages in this book, 180 photographs. And it's been a vast labor of love. Now, I'll be signing some books outside that door there and back after. Please know that all income from this book, Volume 2, goes directly into printing Volume 3, which continues the amazing stories of Srila Prabhupada in India and all over the world, which I hope to bring you next year, 2021. Thank you all so much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you. Is there time for any questions? Or?
Yes, question.
Okay, there's time for...
We have time for just a couple of questions.
Yeah.
किसको कोई प्रश्न है तो पूछ सकते हैं? किसका कोई प्रश्न? Okay. 3 people. Start with Ali Prasad Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhuji, so you have been with Srila Prabhupada so much, so if you could just explain one most important concern that Srila Prabhupada had for all his disciples, like one most important thing that Prabhupada wanted that all his disciples should be doing.
Okay. If there is one thing Srila Prabhupada wanted his disciples to have, it was happiness. And the symptom of happiness is what? Laughter. Right? If you're having fun, you're happy. I once asked Srila Prabhupada, what is the meaning of the word laughter? He said, laughter is the difference between what you think will happen and what really happens. So life should be a continuous surprise. If you relax and let Krishna unreel the world before you, you will be constantly surprised and happy. You will laugh to see it all. It's a cosmic comedy. But you can only get this connection, this way of seeing things, by surrendering your life to it. It's not easy. But when you can do it, you have the most fun of anyone, and that's all Prabhupada wanted for his disciples, was to be happy. No?
Thank you so much. My question is, you served Srila Prabhupada personally. So, what is the most important thing for a servant to serve his master? Who's serving especially personally? So, can you say this?
Well, it's the same thing in reverse. You want to make Srila Prabhupada happy. You want to see that smile on his face. And what made Srila Prabhupada happy was always different. You couldn't expect it. Whenever you opened the door to Srila Prabhupada's room, you never knew what was going to happen. You couldn't predict anything with Prabhupada. But it was always a joyful experience. So when you, after some time, I could see that what made Srila Prabhupada the happiest was when one of his disciples did something really big for Krishna, to spread Krishna consciousness in the world. Those devotees got the most attention from Srila Prabhupada. So there was kind of a transcendental competition going on between the God brothers. Who can do the biggest thing for Prabhupada? Because then you got his attention. It was friendly. We always wished our godbrother's the best, but I just want to do something a little bit better than my godbrother in order to please Prabhupada more. Okay.
Prabhuji, you mentioned that at times Prabhupada used to give instructions which you thought at that point of time was something maybe impossible to achieve. How did you manage to reconcile with that, the instructions of Srila Prabhupada and the perception within you that it is something impossible, but still you managed to motivate yourself to achieve that? How did you manage that?
Well, we were certain that whatever Prabhupada did was going to be perfect. So, I mean, it was kind of our job to say, oh, Prabhupada, that may not work. We always knew whatever he did would work. There was never any doubt about that because Krishna was in his life 24 hours a day. He was when you came close to Prabhupada, if you were even in the same town with Prabhupada, you knew everything was going to be okay. He was that powerful, secure. He was safe. Any place around Prabhupada was safe no matter what happened. The worst thing could happen. I mean, so many things happened to us. One small story will be in volume 3. Prabhupada gave a talk in Mexico, a little town, Cuernavaca, Mexico. Mexico is kind of a violent place. And he'd finished his talk, and we were walking back to the car down the street, and Prabhupada was surrounded by 4 or 5 big brahmacharis and sannyasis. And suddenly this very drunk man came down the street, weaving down the street, pushing everyone out of his way. He went right through us, and it was just about to collide with Prabhupada. And Prabhupada raised his cane and went, "Bop!" and hit the guy on the head and knocked him out. And then he just kept walking as if nothing happened. Time after time, these kind of things happen. So you were always safe with Prabhupada. And you always knew that whatever he dreamed or wanted would come true.
Little Saraswati was like really adored by Prabhupada. We get to hear from Leela that little Saraswati was really adored by Prabhupada.
Yeah.
Can you throw some light on how was Saraswati also part of this Indian expedition?
Yes, she was with us from day one in India. She was, she was 1 year old, I think, when we got here. Slightly more than 1 year old. When Prabhupada first saw her, she was the first devotee conceived and born in ISKCON. So when we first brought her to Srila Prabhupada, she was only 2 months old. Prabhupada went, oh, and he went back in his back and he said, hello there, dear old friend, it's so nice to see you again. He's only 2 months old. So she must have been a friend of his from previous lives or something. Because wherever we went with Prabhupada, she would come with us, and she would often sit in his lap in the cars and so on. She was his favorite. Many mornings I would get in there pretty early to take dictation for letters or whatever. And she would already be in there having a conversation with Prabhupada, and he'd be playing with her. He loved to pull jokes on her, hide things from her, pinch her cheeks, tell her stories. One day he told her, well, your father, Shyamsunder, he and I are going away tomorrow, and we'll be gone 1 month. Your father will be gone. And he made her cry. She started crying. He says, but he said, I know I have a solution. We will put you in a box and put a lot of stamps on the box, and we will mail you to your father. And she thought about it, and then she went, ah! Started crying again, and Prabhupada cracks up. He loved it. Anyway, she's 51 years old now. Yeah, she has 2 children. I'm a grandfather yeah. So anyway, Prabhupada loved every living entity. Every living entity. Except maybe once in a while a mosquito. one time in Mayapur, I was sleeping on the floor by his bed, and he had a mosquito net over his bed. And I kept hearing this. Finally, I heard the word, Shyamsunder, come up here. I opened it, I had a flashlight, I turned the flashlight on, I went up into his bed, and he said, there's one mosquito here, kill it. So he held the flashlight, and I went, I finally got it. All right. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.